our very special guest calling in today on the line, Nelson Badillo, the chairman of the Border, Commerce, and Security Council. Nelson, good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing this day?
Thank you very much for calling. I know you're a regular on the Fox News Network, and I know you're going on there in a little while right after our show. So thank you for calling in right after Christmas. I hope you had a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year coming up for you and your family.
Thank you very much. Certainly glad to be on your show, Mike, and I hope you did too.
Yeah, I had a great time, and we got 28 degrees, and I'm sure out in Texas it's a lot better than here. We're in Southern Virginia, and it's 28 degrees. However, it was great meeting you. I was in the same hotel out in San Antonio a couple of weeks ago when you were having some summit, a border security summit, and it looked interesting. I introduced myself. We had a little conversation, and I'm so happy that I was going to be filling in for John this week. And I have a couple of questions because John and I and others within the Washington, D.C. community are concerned, and things change. As you know, they're fluid day to day with the president and the Congress. So I have a few questions for you, if you don't mind. Take the time, and you can answer as best you could.
You got it.
What is happening right now on the border regarding the illegal entries? Give me an idea.
Well, okay, so we have to separate the illegal entries and what's happening on the border by those that are looking for asylum and those that are looking to bring drugs or other paraphernalia, the human traffickers, or those that do not qualify for asylum that are crossing the border. They're your normal crossers. So what's happened over the last year and a half is you have organized crime, like the cartels south of the border that are working in Central America to recruit people at anywhere between $4,000 to $7,000 a head to bring them to the U.S. border. Right. So what's happening is, if you look at the statistics of 2017, March 2017, we had about 2,000 people that were being arrested per month that were part of the asylum group. These are families that are bringing minor children or unaccompanied minors. Just in October, November this year, that number has risen to over 30,000.
Oh, my gosh.
Now, go ahead.
That was a huge number, big number.
Huge numbers. Those are things. It's because what's happened is they're exploiting a refugee law, asylum laws that the United States has. So if that person or family comes to the border and claims credible fear of return, then what happens is those folks are arrested. They're processed within about 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. They're released into the United States normally, what they call what we heard of the catch and release policy,
yes,
and asked to come back to court. But the problem is our courts are so backed up, 2 to 3 years backed up, that by the time these people come back, well, they actually don't come back. Only about 7% of these people actually have the credible fear and can prove credible fear. So 93% of the folks never make it to court, therefore become now an illegal entity inside the United States.
So what are the Border Patrol and other agencies doing to prevent these entries?
Well, they're doing what they can. So all they could do is, when you're talking the asylum folks, those folks are not running from the Border Patrol. They're actually turned themselves in. They're instructed on this journey, right? This very dangerous journey, mind you, because a lot of these families, unaccompanied minors, suffer assaults, rapes, a number of items. It's very, very sad. They actually get to the border and turn themselves in. They look for an agent so they can get processed, claim the credible fear, and get released in the general population. Those are separate, however, from the folks that are either running drugs or the other folks that do not apply for credible fear. In other words, they may be from a country of interest outside this hemisphere that may be trying to reach us, do us harm. Those are arrested and treated very differently, normally deported or arrested, kept in jails. Or if they can deport them, they will deport them. If they are caught with drugs or some other type of weapons or so forth, then they're treated very differently. But the asylum issue right now is something that no matter what type of wall, technology, whatever we put on there, it makes it very difficult because these folks are just turning themselves in. They're wall agnostic.
So basically, it's a congressional issue. We have to change law. We have to have legislation.
Yes, that's correct. We have to go out there, change this law so that we better define what credible fear, better define what these immigration laws will look like, because it becomes an immigration issue. For example, a lot of people think that there's a wall, that there is some type of barrier right on the U.S.-Mexico border, and that's false, right? Right on the San Diego border, that maybe 0.5% of border may have a wall right on the border, but the other 99% is away from the actual border line, or it could be hundreds of yards away from the border line. The wall is intended to impede, right, through persistence impedance, which is part of the Border Patrol's strategy, is to slow folks down so they have the opportunity to arrest them, right? It's the same thing. You can't put a wall in the middle of the river. Anything south of El Paso to Brownsville in Texas, you can't put a wall in the river. So once you cross the middle of that river, theoretically, you're on U.S. soil. If you touch the shore, you're on U.S. soil. So now the Border Patrol's job is to arrest you and process you accordingly. That wall is used to obviously impede. So again, they can get time to arrest you once you've already crossed into the U.S. soil.
So let me ask you something. How do these people who are making $50 or $150 a month, how do they wind up with $4,000 or $5,000 to get to the border? I mean, where are they getting this money from?
That's a great question. So a typical family of four that may leave Guatemala, for example, through a cartel. Again, this is organized crimes that take you. Will pay. Let's say an average of $5,000 a head. So somebody stays back. Let's say a grandma, a father, a mother. They have to stay back. So these folks will do whatever they need to do to put some type of quote unquote down payment to the cartel. Now these now become in servants while they're in the United States. So they're going to say, I'm going to cross you. You're going to get to work in the U.S. You're going to deposit X number of dollars per month in this account, or you're going to give it to this person. And once you pay your debt off, you're off the hook. If you don't pay your debt, somebody back home is going to pay. And that they either kill that family member, they dismember them, whatever that may be. Normally, they pay. So as long as we have these laws that continue not to be fixed and overlooked, we're almost feeding the organized crime, a steady stream of funding to continue this operation, and for every other operation that may do harm not to the general population and not just the United States.
Well, they could be bringing in some drugs for them too, right? Muling some drugs and carrying drugs for them.
Yeah, normally that could be, they will do that. Now, a lot of the asylum seekers, they'll try to stay away from that because what these cartel members are saying, heck, if I can get this family of four over to the United States, get them processed and get them out in the general population, I got, a few $1,000s coming my way because I've held somebody hostage back home. However, these same institutions will run drugs, will have other typical types of operations over the border, where it's not necessarily through those asylum seekers, not those family of mules, but they use other people to do that will be also in between the borders. And that's the traditional border crosser that we've always looked at, is the folks that are running drugs, illegal substances, and so forth, or those what many people call economic migrants that are coming over illegally crossing to just work in the United States. This whole asylum thing, this caravan thing, it's a racket. I mean, and we're being taken advantage of a loophole because we're the United States, and we're blessed to have a great country. We're blessed to have great people in this country that are that want to be good to everyone. Well, it gets to a point where the good becomes being taken advantage of, and unfortunately, that's what's happening today.
So, how have things changed since the caravan started heading to the U.S.-Mexican border?
Well, the caravan is just another. I will say that we have a caravan a day crossing the border.
Wow. Because
you have thousands of people being arrested from San Diego to Brownsville a day. So the caravan has just been a media attention. I always call that, almost like a flea flicker. If you know college football and you know flea flicker, which is basically a play where you're tricking out your opponent, where the quarterback looks one way but throws the other way. So what's happened is they've taken a lot of this media attention and focused it in the San Diego area. Meanwhile, everybody's crossing, east of there by droves. And I'm not saying that stopped, but the caravan is just simply, it's just something that's attracting a media attention in a very big way, while really ignoring what's happening on the rest of the border, where most of the illegal immigrants are going through, and that's really through the Rio Grande Valley. That's in the Brownsville, Harlingen, McAllen area, the tip of Texas, a little bit southeast of Laredo. That's where you have most of the entries. Why? Because it's closest to Central America. That's where they choose. People say, well, why did they go to Tijuana? Why did they go all that way? Well, because the organized crime moved it that way. Let's not be naive, okay? If you're crossing the U.S. border, you are in cahoots with organized crime. And what I mean is, I'm not saying you're a criminal. What I'm saying is you've paid these people off. It is so controlled. This border is so controlled that nobody crosses just by chance, or wakes up one morning and says, maybe I think I'll go to the United States. Right. That's not the case. That's not the case. You're paying a toll to cross into the United States. It's a money-making machine for these people. Tell us the numbers. What is the commerce that comes over the border every day? The numbers. So very important. So the commerce is a huge importance to the United States, Canada, U.S., Mexico, especially with the new treaty and the old NAFTA. So you're talking 10,000 trucks a day. Wow. Flow over the U.S. border from San Diego to Brownsville. 10,000. About $1.3 billion of international trade between U.S., Mexico, bilateral trade. That's some going south, some going north. Right. So it's a huge number. Huge number. That's what occurs on the ports of entries. Remember, when we talk about caravan, when we talk about illegal entries, we're always focusing on the guys in green, the Border Patrol, the things that happen in between those ports of entries. Rarely does the American public, or do we get a lot of lens on the ports of entry, the guys in blue, the customs officers that also work every day to fight crime. Big drugs go over those ports of entries. Because you're talking 10,000 trucks. Now, and let's say I'm a cartel member and I'm putting a load of cocaine on 10 trucks. I know maybe 2 or 3 are going to get caught, but 7 are going to get through, and that's my cost of doing business. So there's a lot of stuff flowing over those borders. I'll tell you, but it's tough to balance trade, commerce, international trade and commerce, and security. Those guys do the best they possibly can. We have equipment. There's a lot of non-intrusive inspection systems that are put in these trucks and so forth. But some get through. I mean, it's just the same way they get through in between the ports of entries. So it's a two-part play here. And you can't close the border down. I mean, could you imagine you close the border down, the catastrophic loss in international trade and jobs? Oh. I mean, it would just make things worse. Doing that is just simply not an option. We just got to figure out ways to fix the broken system that we have today, fund the border wall, fund border security, fund technology. I mean, the border wall has become, I'm not sure it's just a general term of just funding the border for border security or actual physical barrier. There's places that we need more physical barrier. There's places that we need to fix the physical barrier. Or update the physical part. And there's places that we just need technology on this border. There's very low tech. I mean, it's like some of these things of like Fred Flintstone and Barney Rubble out there. That's what I was going to ask you next. It's really like that. What do we need to do to try to prevent these entries? And what exactly? Also, the Coast Guard. Isn't the Coast Guard an issue? You have the coast there, right? Absolutely. So there's a lot of stuff happening through that Pacific corridor and certainly through the Gulf Coast. A lot of these, what they call shark boats, right? Boats carrying drugs, some carrying humans that are being smuggled. Again, if you're being smuggled into the United States, that means you are not an asylum seeker. I mean, in other words, you would not qualify, right? Which again is 72% of the illegal entries today are these asylum seekers. Now, the Coast Guard's are doing their job as well. and God bless for what they do. You know, they're protecting those corridors where there's a lot of drugs. Now, most of the stuff that they get are drugs because they can get one of these fast boats, these shark boats they call them. They do the go fast boats, and they can load a couple tons of substance on there and make a run for it very close to the shore. Some get caught, some get through. You know, so they certainly play a crucial role in protecting our maritime sides.
Mm. This is very interesting. So have you been to Congress? I'm sure you have. Have you given testimony?
I've in the past, I've given testimony. I've talked to Republicans and Democrats. Surprisingly, you know, a lot of these people agree. Hey, I don't think anybody wants illegal immigration. No one's for illegal immigration. Mm-hmm. But the problem is at the end of the day, when they get together, they can't agree. I mean, I talk to them and they seem to agree. And then when they get together, they get in front of the news media. It's kind of like they, you know, crawl back in their shell and they don't want to agree. We need to do something. And certainly we need to look at legislation. We need to look at funding, border wall, technology, security issues, personnel. Because we can't do it without the personnel. We need to do these kind of things so that we can have a safer place and certainly control our borders. I mean, it's not that we don't want immigrants. We absolutely want immigrants in this country. But there's a right way to do that. Mm-hmm. And we need to figure out, you know, how to enforce the right way of doing that. And then what do we do with the people that are here that came over in, you know, the wrong way? That's another issue. I hate to, that's a whole different discussion. Mm-hmm. However, we certainly need to stop the hemorrhage. And what we need is putting Band-Aids on something that needs major surgery.
What's happening with border? Who's running the Border Patrol operation down there in your area in Texas?
So down here is a guy named Manny Padilla. Mm-hmm. He's the Commander Padilla is running most of the South Texas campaign area, South Texas corridor. He just got moved up to the Joint Task Force West, which is out of San Antonio. Now that Joint Task Force West is a combination between ICE, Coast Guard, Border Patrol, obviously Customs involved as well, that looks at the strategy on how to strategically look at anything from funding to different types of programs and so forth from San Diego to Brownsville. So very important piece. That piece reports directly to the secretary. Dotted lines to the Border Patrol chief and the other chiefs, but it is combined joint with the other forces so that they can have a very close-knit group of collaboration between each other. So we look forward to Manny coming on board on next week, actually, is when he reports in, and we'll look at, you know, he's done a great job in the Rio Grande Valley and that South Texas corridor area, and we look forward to seeing him really do some very innovative changes. One of the things that he's done that we have helped him with very closely is communicating with south of the border, communicating with those governors south of the border. Again, they're not for illegal immigration either, mm-hmm. because it affects them. Right, this flow of folks that decide not to go into the United States ends up being, folks that work for half the price of a Mexican national would in different job industries south of the border. So they're not for this either. So communication is key. Manny has been very instrumental in creating these lines of communication south of the border, where really a lot of the other agents in that particular capacity have not done that, right? So we look forward to working with him very closely to ensure that continues, and how we can really look at that for the rest of the border. There's a lot of folks out there that, you know, are totally against this. They're totally against the way this is being handled. Nobody wants, you know, these groups in their areas. And
I'm sure really the sheriffs.
It needs to start off also with the Mexican president. This new Mexican president has to do more. And I fear that he's not doing what the last guy's done.
I think the sheriffs need a lot of help also in that Rio Grande Valley, too.
You know, I'll tell you, the sheriffs on the border are another line of defense that need absolute help. A lot of these sheriffs are stricken because they're small counties, or the counties on the borders are not as large to have a big funding base. So they rely on Department of Homeland Security grants and so forth. But those border sheriffs, I'll tell you, they're doing more with less than ever before. And we got to give them a helping hand. And that's where that force multiplier effect goes in, is how do we use the Texas Rangers? How do we use the Department of Public Safety here in Texas, for example? How do we use the Border Patrol? How do we combine these forces through this joint task force to be able to ensure that we have a force multiplier effect, and these people are not out there alone?
Nelson, thank you. I want you also to pass, if you can, the gentleman, Mr. Padilla's information. We'll try to get him on the show soon, right after New Year's. We'll keep the public informed. I want to thank you for coming on after Christmas. This is great information, and we hope to invite you back on again. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Anytime. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye now.